Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a thrilling journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the enigmatic mysteries of the past, and the uncharted territories of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the intricate tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean. And this is episode 14.
Man, 14.
Yeah.
Getting closer to 2 decades.
Today we have an episode about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I'm going to shake it up a little bit. We've been doing a lot of Chris Bledsoe and secret history of the world.
A lot of like esotericism, and
which is good. We love that stuff.
And yeah, let's get
lighten it up a bit, maybe.
I mean,
maybe not.
I don't know how
we'll go into
the topic is, but
we'll go into a different type of deep.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Bitcoin today, which is the world's first digital cryptocurrency. And it's freaking amazing. And I've been a Bitcoin head for quite a while.
Yeah, you first introduced it to me. When did it first pop off?
2009. I first heard about it probably around 2011-ish.
Man, 2009, imagine just getting out of high school. Imagine investing in that, not knowing.
Oh, I know, dude. Yeah. So we'll get into all that. Before we get into Bitcoin, though, there was an interesting article I saw this week from George Howard of the Cosmic Tusk.
Please share.
Yeah. So it turns out that the New York Times has published a story about the Younger Dryas Comet impact.
Paywall.
It's paywalled, but on the Cosmic Tusk website, he actually posts the full article, which I don't know if he is supposed to, but it's here.
Did you download it while you could?
I do. Yeah, I have a copy of it. It's not crazy long, but it's long enough that I don't want it to like be the whole first chunk of the show.
Right.
But in general, it's according to George.
Does it got a synopsis or like a... No?
Yeah, so George Howard says, as a science news reader my entire life, this is an extraordinary article in many ways. First, it mentions the Tusk. Mm-hmm. Second, it is well written and reflects an effort and skill in keeping with the subject matter. Third, the most important event in Earth and human history has now been well addressed in the New York Times.
So this is...
Yeah, and he's got a couple quotes here from the article. William Topping, an archaeologist, was studying a site in Michigan's Upper Peninsula where ancient North Americans quarried the raw materials to make their stone tools when he encountered a puzzle in the late 1990s. Anthropological geological evidence indicated that the layer of soil containing the ancient artifacts dated to around 12,900 years ago, just before the start of the Younger Dryas. But radiocarbon dating suggests that it was only 2,900 years old. Topping sent an email about this problem to Richard Firestone, an expert on radioactive isotopes, who was then working at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Firestone, who told me that he always had an interest in side projects, agreed to help.
So that's interesting. So the soil dated to 12,900 years ago that it was buried in. Yeah. But the radiocarbon dating was only 2,900
No,
years.
the soil was dated to 12,900 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, the soil containing the artifacts was dated to 12,900. But the radiocarbon dating suggests that the layer was only 2,900. So that when they...
Meaning that there was some sort of radioactive event that threw off the radiocarbon dating.
Yeah. Interesting.
And there would be some radioactivity with the comet
we'll definitely
impact.
have to read this.
So I'll leave a link to this. It's on cosmictusk.com, which is the website of George Howard, who's like, he's not one of the scientists. He's more of like the communicator for the Younger Dryas, for the Comet Research Group. And his website, Cosmic Tusk, has a bunch of articles and stuff all about it. But anyway,
cool.
Check it out.
Definitely.
So yeah, Bitcoin. Man,
just looking at your notes.
I know. I tried to come prepared. I just wanted to make sure I got
you were going to say I was going to try to keep it simple.
No. I'm going to try and keep it understandable.
Keep it nerdy.
But I think it's really important that people have more of a surface level, more than a surface level understanding of it.
I know I need more than a surface level.
Yeah.
I know really little about the inner workings of it, so.
Yeah. So
fascinating to learn.
Consider this your primer as to what is Bitcoin and why all the hype, other than just the fact that price go up. It's a lot more than that. Yeah, like people may have associated some buzzwords, but they don't necessarily understand why that's the case or know why for themselves that it is the case.
Sure.
So it's important to understand the technology and why it's such a big deal. And I'm going to hope to achieve that for us today. But as an introduction, I wrote this little intro. Bitcoin is the first peer-to-peer, decentralized, borderless, apolitical, mathematically secure, hard digital currency. There's a lot of qualifiers. And I say it's peer-to-peer because you can send it directly from one person to another. There's no bank in the middle. There's no trusted third party who is transacting your... who has their hands on the money and is to be trusted with it while the process is happening. Like if you pay anyone... It doesn't
have to be, right? Because there still are like apps and this and that
there are ways to get rid of Bitcoin's security, which we'll go into. Yeah. Like I got a whole security section outlined.
Okay.
But by default, like with a standard Bitcoin wallet, if you send Bitcoin to someone, it's a direct send, right. Essentially. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's decentralized because what runs the system is a piece of software that runs on computers all over the world. There's no server. So
there's no one physical place.
Right. If you've dealt on the internet before, you may, or if you're a little bit tech savvy, you probably have an understanding that like most of our internet is set up as like a client server model. So you type in the name of a website, even ours, dualitycheck.net. Yep. And what is happening when you enter that is that your computer is finding a server out there on the internet and asking that server for information. And so the server is the thing that controls it.
It stores it, right?
Yeah, and a lot of computer and internet technologies are server-based, which is fine in certain circumstances, but you don't want that with money. You don't want that with a currency because then that server is something you have to trust.
Right.
And
unless it's your server.
Well, yeah, but no one else will trust it then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's borderless because, again, it runs anywhere, everywhere, as long as you have an internet connection, a cell phone with internet connection, a freaking $20 used Android phone with an internet connection. You can use Bitcoin, which is pretty amazing.
So yeah, it truly can be used all over the world for the most part.
Mm-hmm. It's apolitical because no government in the world has control over it or can shut it down. They can do their best to ban it in their country, but they can do nothing to shut down Bitcoin itself. Yeah. The only way Bitcoin can be shut down is if the entire internet and all computers go away and never come back.
Right. Could you limit people's access to I guess not really.
Yeah,
Unless you limit their internet
think of it like
access in
this.
itself.
Yeah, think of it like this. It's like back in the day when people used to download like free movies and music and stuff.
Yeah.
The OG one was like Napster, and Napster was a server-based model, so there was a central node that was passing.
They just had to find
the details around, and so the government just has to find that and shut that down.
Right.
Whereas,
but now they have to find every single computer, which is basically just shutting down everything.
Right.
Everything.
Whereas now,
connected to Bitcoin.
What all the downloaders and pirators switched to after things like Napster is to torrenting, and torrenting is a decentralized technology, which is why it's still around to this day.
Yeah.
And it can't be shut down without shutting down the entire internet.
Torrenting is basically like taking little pieces of the whole project from
so it's a protocol.
Sources.
It's a protocol. Like it's a set of rules that each computer agrees to abide by, and they hop on the network and follow that protocol. So you search for a file, and it puts out a blast to the network asking who has pieces of it. And then it gets little pieces from anyone, and then any one computer can go down, and it won't affect the network.
Right.
But there's no central server that those files rest on. There's no thing that you can turn off that will turn off torrenting.
There's
it
no
exists
address,
as long as the internet does.
Associated to it that the government can come and seize.
Right.
Or shut down. Got it.
It's mathematically secure because it was designed by cryptographers, and cryptography is used to construct the technology in a way that is mathematically
impervious.
It's impervious to certain types.
People try to crack it or whatever.
Right. Like you as an individual can be insecure with your usage of it, and someone could take advantage of that, but no one can hack the network. No one can crack Bitcoin and break it down through any sort of cyber attacks.
And that's like the transfer of the individual coins themselves, right? Like
or the blockchain that stores all the information. Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard money because there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins. What
do you mean it's hard money?
Hard money. So in like economics, they have labels like hard money and easy money. A hard money is a money that has a limited quantity and a limited ability to create more.
So it's not like our
gold
US dollar.
Is like the classic hard money because it's very limited. It's the most rare resource inside the earth crust.
Right.
And
you can't just replicate it.
It gets harder and harder and harder to mine deeper and deeper and deeper to get more gold.
And the value is based off weight, not just the physical. Like, because with gold, you can stretch it, right? You can plate everything in gold and make it look gold, like make this big object look gold. Mm-hmm. But the value is in the weight of it, how much of, like that's why it's sold by the ounce or whatever.
But it's considered hard money because of what's called like a stock to flow ratio. So the stock is how much gold exists on the planet. Okay, that would be the stocks. I've heard it's like an Olympics, like an Olympic-sized swimming pool is basically as much gold as we've mined.
Doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot.
That is a lot, yeah. But it doesn't seem like a lot.
Doesn't seem like
it
a
is
lot,
pretty rare.
It is a lot, yeah. To see a Olympic-sized swimming pool full of gold would be.
But if you compare that amount of gold that has ever been produced to the amount that gets produced every year, it's a tiny percentage of the amount of gold that can be produced every year.
Right, so we have...
And so it's got a high stock and a low flow.
Right.
So that stock to flow ratio is really good, which makes it in the category of a hard money.
Gotcha, so that means the value is pretty steady.
Right. Whereas US dollars, they are...
As we all know now.
The stock is in the trillions and getting crazier every year. Yeah. And the flow is whatever the government wants it to be.
Whatever they decide. They open the floodgate. They turn the valve and open it up.
So there's no guarantee that that money will maintain its value. In fact,
it won't.
You would be foolish to think it would.
Yeah. It's we'll get into more about how.
Yeah. So,
but it is foolish.
In
what do we
on October 31st, 2008, someone going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonym.
We don't know. Still nobody knows who that is.
No.
That's awesome.
He published a technical white paper entitled "Bitcoin: A Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System to an Online Cryptography Mailing List." So, did you ever used to be involved in any mailing lists back in the day?
No.
It's basically a bunch of nerds could set up where they all copy each other on their emails and they just have conversations across email.
No, I never really did that.
Yeah, so there's this now famous cryptography mailing list, and that's where the Bitcoin white paper first appeared.
Okay.
And so Satoshi, as a cryptographer nerd, this was the abstract from the paper. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending. We propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof-of-work network, or forming a record that cannot be changed without undoing the proof of work. The longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proves that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as the majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace the attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone.
So is that mining?
Yeah.
Is that kind of outlining mining?
Yeah, which I'll go into here. So I'm just laying some background info here. So that's essentially the high level synopsis of what it is, which there's a lot of jargon in there, so we'll have to break down a lot of that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I understood it as being mining, but I didn't necessarily so he's talking about when you're engaged in the act of mining, the largest CPU forms the longest chain, and the attackers is basically what is the attackers reference?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Then here's just an interesting tidbit. This is the first ever block of Bitcoin that was mined by Satoshi Nakamoto. So this was the very first creation of Bitcoin. Was January 3rd, 2009 is when it officially launched. And this is the original block of data, which I'll share a photo for you guys. But to prove that he mined it that day, he includes this message from the Times, 3rd of January 2009. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks.
Oh wow!
That's
so sick.
Yeah,
that's so sick.
If you see here,
wow.
This is the Times from January 3rd.
Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks.
Yep. Wow. That's a collector's item for Bitcoin nerds now.
Oh, I bet. Your birthday's coming up. I'm just kidding. I'm not getting that.
I would love it.
It's probably ridiculous. It's probably a whole Bitcoin to buy that right now.
You could probably buy a print. I'll take a print.
All right.
All right, so before we go into all the technical details of exactly how Bitcoin works, I want to set the table by talking about why Bitcoin. Okay. So in the history of money, gold has typically won out as the best, strongest form of money. And it's got a lot of pros and a lot of cons, right? But lots of things have been used as money across time. Back in the day, it used to be cattle and salt. Some places use seashells. There's a particular island that uses these like massive stones that no one can move. They just sit there, and they sign over the rights to a portion of it to people, and that's their money, which is actually really similar to Bitcoin in concept.
Because it's like an immovable thing that nobody can take full ownership of, right?
Because the whole community witnesses when someone transfers
right in front of your face,
to someone else. That's similar to how Bitcoin operates.
God, that's kind of
is you're essentially allowing the entire network to witness that you're saying you're sending Bitcoin from one person to another. But seashells, people have used sticks. People have used there's so many things have been used as money over time.
Right.
But gold emerged and became wildly popular, and eventually people caught on that places that use gold would have much more successful economies than places that didn't, and so more and more.
I wonder if it's just because they could place higher value on it or something, or what, or they had enough to be able to assign it a higher value, or what?
No, so there's a lot of reasons. So here are the pros for gold. It's really difficult to get a hold of, okay? Mm-hmm. Which is important for a money, because if anyone can just go grab more of it out of nature, then that will destroy the value of your money, right?
True.
If our money was pieces of office paper that had a little tiny black pen circle on the top left, and that's all it was, why would you go out and work to get those when you could just go buy a bunch of office paper and draw a bunch of circles and make your own money? Right?
True, yeah.
So, and then the effect of that is, as you spend that into the economy, it would cause prices to
inflate,
rise, right? As the money became less valuable.
Dilutes the value, inflates the prices. Yeah.
Right. So the fact that it's rare is very important, but the fact that it's really difficult to mine is also important.
Yeah, you can't just have it easy like any person with a laptop,
right?
In this case.
Because as more and more of the world started using gold as money, the value will go up because the supply can't grow at the same pace. And so that would incentivize people to go mine gold, but mining gold has never historically gone any higher than 3 or 4% of the supply in a year. Except for I think 1 or 2 years ever in history.
Or we had a boom or something.
Like a technology comes along with a new mining technique or
dynamite.
Something. But even still, it goes right back down. It's pretty consistent 2 to 3%. I
wonder if there's a estimated. I guess there's an estimate if there's ever been an estimation of how much gold might be in
the Earth.
There's no way to know, really.
There are estimates, but they're just estimates.
Yeah, there's no really. Once you find a little mine that's never been touched.
The real thing, if we were still using gold to this day, the real thing that would be dangerous now that we're entering this space age and private space companies is someone going and finding an asteroid rich in gold and bringing it back and hyperinflating the currency because of it,
Yeah, but we're not really on a gold standard anymore.
No. Kind of, but not really. Gold is got that high stock to flow ratio like I talked about earlier. But it's a really stable element. That's one of the reasons why it's such a good currency is because unlike other metals that you could use, gold doesn't corrode. It doesn't break down. It's really, really stable. It's very resistant to chemical activity.
Right.
It's easily divisible. It's a soft and malleable, but still holds its shape kind of metal. It's not that hard to work. So you can break it down into uniform units and coins, and you can divide those. And so it's relatively easy to work with in that regard. And from a political side and an economic side, gold is great because when we were on a gold standard, when gold was money, in order for governments to do really expensive projects that they couldn't afford,
They'd have to get it from people.
They would have to tax people because they couldn't just create more money. The only way for them to get more money was to take it from the people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that really a pro, though?
It is a pro because it keeps government power in check.
Yeah.
Because you can only
right. I mean,
you can only tax people so much before they stop taking it.
Right. I guess that's implying that the tax is fully compliant and people are willing to tax based on based on the value that you're going to give them off of the project. Whatever,
we're a lot more like docile these days, but like the American Revolution was over such a small tax rate compared to what we pay today. Like people don't stand for taxes going crazy. Yeah.
Get out of my house. Get out of my face.
You can only raise taxes so much before people just stop. Anyway,
I wish I was the same way now.
There are some downsides to gold in comparison with things like Bitcoin, which is that verifying gold can be difficult to like a layman.
Fool's gold.
I mean, it's relatively easy to take it to someone to have it verified that it's real.
From an expert, yeah.
For you as an individual, it's very hard to know, like...
Yeah, if you don't know anything about
someone
gold.
hands you a thing that looks like gold, how do you know that it's not gold-coated? I mean, that's why people used to, like, buy coins and stuff to, like... That was kind of like a poor man's test.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But it could be difficult to verify, and so there could be some scam. Minting can be tampered with, and this is actually goes back in history to like the Roman Empire, and multiple governments have done this throughout the years, where they'll essentially clip or shave little bits and pieces off the coins. So as people pay their taxes, right, to the crown, they'll shave off little bits of every single gold coin that comes in, and then spend them back into the economy. And then they take all those shavings and make more gold coins, and that was their way of sort of inflating the currency. Yeah,
or lining their own pockets, right?
Yeah, lining their own pockets. It's inflation.
Yeah,
it's the
for
same
sure.
idea. It's just not. But that's actually where the ridges on coins came from.
So you can be able to tell somebody shaved it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It's so interesting. All these things that are like left over from a time when because we're talking about ridges on quarters and dimes and all these other like coins now. Like nobody's
it doesn't have a use. Yeah, there's no use in shaving a quarter. But they're still
left over from that time when those things were happening, which is just interesting.
It just feels a little more official, a little more.
Yeah, it feels like it's went through a more of a rigorous, you know.
Governments, have. I just talked about that. It became so valuable that silver and copper were used for smaller transactions
because of the value being so great.
Right, and that was actually one of the downsides of gold, is that because of how limited it was and because of everyone using it got so valuable that you had to use something different for smaller transactions.
Sounds like Bitcoin and Dogecoin.
Right. And so like using a gold with silver and copper was a thing for a while, but like there's problems with that because silver and gold silver is a lot easier to mine than gold. It's got a higher flow rate. And so the exchange rate between silver and gold would always fluctuate.
Yeah, they're not.
So you can't just peg them to each other. So
something you might have just bought for gold and silver, and then not too long after, like you just lost money based on like how varying it was.
Right, like you need to buy some stuff so you convert your gold to silver, but then it just happened to be at a time where someone hit a jackpot of silver and dumped it on the market, and now your value goes down.
Yeah, you just lost a bunch of money. Yeah.
And the other con for gold is that it is what led us to this paper money system. And it did so because of the history of gold warehousing. So one of the problems with gold is that it was susceptible to be stolen, right? So if you were going on a big travel and you needed to bring your money with you,
let's say
there's a lot of risk involved in that, right?
Yeah.
And so what you would do is you would warehouse your gold with someone who could keep it safe for you, and they would give you a paper receipt for the amount of gold in their vault that they are protecting for you. And then you would go wherever you need to go, and that little piece of paper is a lot lighter, a lot more safe to travel with.
Yeah.
But then the problem is then people started trading those receipts. And that was essentially the beginning of paper money.
Were those greenbacks or were those...
No, it was way before that.
This is just like straight up gold receipts, right?
Yeah, this is just gold receipts. This is like 1600s, maybe 1500s.
Greenbacks is like
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay. And for modern use, the con for gold, and the reason why we should not go back to gold as money now is that, well, at least it couldn't serve the full role that we would need it to, is because you can't use it over the internet. Can't sell gold, send gold across your internet connection or across your Wi-Fi.
You can send a receipt.
Right, but now you're introducing a trusted third party.
Right.
So the problem with... so gold essentially led to banking out of warehousing. Warehousing became... warehousing gold for people and keeping it secure and making deliveries for people became a profitable business. And when you run it for long enough and you realize you have a certain amount of gold in there, but only ever a certain amount of people are ever coming to get it at a given time, then you realize you can start loaning out paper receipts to people based on the gold you have in your vault that isn't actually yours.
And it's not being moved. Like, you know that this amount of gold is always here, so you have a pretty good chance of being able to do that, loaning these receipts where you're making money off of you're making money off of the
you
service.
Would charge interest. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
So gold leads to paper, and I only have a couple pros for paper, which is that it's light and less bulky than gold.
Yeah.
And you can pay your taxes. And that's all I could come up with.
That's about it.
But there's a lot of cons, which is that banks and governments can create it out of thin air.
Well, you forgot one thing on pro, that it keeps your immune system high.
Right. So on the con side, banks and governments can create it out of thin air for cheap, and they do all the time. That's monetary policy.
Yeah.
And that's what the Federal Reserve does, is they try and regulate our economy to control the inflation rate and target a optimized 3% of inflation year by year, which is essentially just economic speak for we print money and we give it to people, and it makes you guys poorer.
Yep. We make more money, you make less.
Yeah. So it can be used to steal the value from citizens for large projects rather than taxation. So that's what's so sneaky about paper money.
It's worse, really.
Is that the tool of inflation is used. So in the book I was just reading about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin standard, which I highly recommend and I'll link to, they were talking about the difference. One of the main differences between, I think it was World War I, was that it was the first war where most of the world governments were on paper money.
Oh, interesting.
And because of that, they were able to use inflation
as an attack method.
Right, because what happens when you go into a wartime is that your government needs funds to keep that war going, and so typically taxes would start going up. Mm-hmm. But if you couldn't keep people paying the taxes and you kept raising them too high, the people would revolt, they'd stop paying. It would be a pain, and you would not be able to keep funding your war. Yeah. But with paper money, you can raise the taxes as much as you need to, but then if you need more and you don't want to raise the taxes anymore because people aren't going to take it, you can just printing it and pay your troops with that.
Putting that in.
And eventually, once that gold goes to once that paper money goes and circulates into the economy, it causes the price hikes. And so anytime a government wants to fund something that it typically couldn't afford, it can just print money. And now it's so down to a science that that's just how the economy works. That's how governments work.
We're also numb to it.
All the governments of the world use paper money and continue to inflate it in order to fund the projects that they want. Your taxes barely go to funding anything that the government does. Most of it's funded by debt. Right. And by inflation. Debt is inflation in our money system. The other problem with paper money is it requires a central trusted authority, right? So there's only one group that is involved with making it. In the modern world, when we're transacting digitally online with paper or with quote unquote paper money with dollars,
right?
Through credit cards and PayPal and things like that,
and all that, yeah.
There's always some institution that is the one that's securing your transaction and collecting fees on that transaction. Mm-hmm. And because some people are going to try and defraud the system and double spend money, it raises the rates and the fees that they have to charge, and it essentially sets a minimum price of what the companies will allow you to essentially sell. So the reason I say that is because for a long time, computer nerds have had the idea that the future of the internet is micropayments, where instead of right now we have this advertising model where you are the product and all of your data and your habits is collected, and that is used to fund these websites who provide you stuff for free. Mm-hmm. But what the nerds have been trying to realize is a internet where everything is done through micropayments. And so instead of your data being the source of value for the company, you're actually paying little quantities of money, fractions of a penny per minute you watch or whatever.
Oh, right.
As a way to avoid advertising as a monetary
So at the end of a video
method.
or at the end of your time on a website, you just have a little thing that pops up and says, this is how much you owe.
Right. Well, and
or
it would
just an automatic
thing the vision
account.
is that it just deducts as you watch, right?
Right.
Which obviously would have its pros and cons, and maybe some people would prefer to be part of a free advertising-based model, but at least the two could compete.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with our current paper-backed system, the cost of transacting online is too risky, and so micropayments aren't feasible.
For it to happen that often, right?
Well, because you'd be paying more in processing fees than you are in the micropayment itself.
So the infrastructure of it is not set up in such a way that would make it feasible, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's other downsides with constant inflation. One of the big problems with constant inflation, which comes with paper money, is that it disincentivizes people from saving money.
Yeah. Makes you want to just spend it because you're going to, money's going to be worth less.
It's the smart, quote unquote, smart thing to do. If you make a bunch of money, or you're hardworking average earner, and you're trying to save for retirement, if you take your earnings and you just put them in a account, or you put them in your mattress or in your safe at home, over time, that money, by the time you retire 20, 30 years later, that money is going to be worth half of what it was when you earned it. And so just saving money doesn't make a lot of sense. And so what it incentivizes you to do is to spend your money,
or to invest it, right?
Or to invest it. And quote unquote investing, this is why the the average person is encouraged into like 401ks and all these mutual funds and all these financial tools where they're not financial experts. The reason they get into them in the first place is because they need a way to hedge against the inherent inflation in the system.
Yeah, looking
in the day,
40 years in the future for, especially if, you're in a job where you see yourself for a long time and you're looking down and you're looking into the future and you're trying to think, how am I going to hedge against all of this inflation? It's the safest for somebody who doesn't have the time to spend.
Right, and average people don't have the time to spend on like being a whiz in financial markets, right? And so you end up hiring a company or a brokerage that manages your money. Right. And now you just got more trusted parties that are handling everyone's cash, and you get all the Wall Street shenanigans that happen. Yep. So it also, constant inflation artificially reduces interest rates, which is like the price of money in the future. And so that essentially is another factor incentivizing spending, even for like the business minded.
Right, because the interest rates go down. You're like, oh my god, I can afford all these things. Like I'm not gonna have to.
Right,
so
like
the yearly payments on the money.
I can take a big loan and fund this project.
You can afford to pay it month to month.
Right, I can afford it at this interest rate, and so people make economic decisions, right, that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And the speculation, it encourages like all these derivative markets, all these like people trying to like ride money up and down, and doing all these crazy schemes and currency trading, and and it funds warfare. Let's just say it, like whatever conflicts are going on around the world, like there's a good chance they're funded by that country's inflation.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence.
Or foreign aid from the U.S., which is also funded by inflation.
Yeah, it's no coincidence that inflation hits pretty hard around the times that wars start happening, popping up all around the globe, where the U.S. leads it because we're the leaders of the NATO and all this.
Right. And so fundamentally, the entire world is on a paper money system, and paper money is just broken. Yeah. From the perspective of the average person who just wants to get ahead in life and live a peaceful life, it is fundamentally not in your favor to have a paper money system. The paper money system only benefits the politically connected, the bankers, the politicians, the people who are able to get the fresh money loans.
They have the leverage on it all.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's outlived its usefulness for the average person, honestly. And now it leads us into a new era.
We need a solution, and that's where Bitcoin comes in.
I think that was a perfect way to introduce it. I think we're up on a break here, a little bit past our normal break time. We'll dive into what we got coming up for Bitcoin.
We got a lot. We're going to explain some of the technicalities of how it works. I'm going to start with Bitcoin's pros and cons first, though, but then we'll start going into how it actually works.
Dogecoin. Yeah, Dogecoin's going to be like a 35-minute segment. See you on a minute.
All right, Joe.
duality check.
The song's called Sunshine, and we're going to talk about the sunshine of monetary schemes.
A little bit of reach, but I like it. So let's go over Bitcoin, because we ended on the pros and cons of paper.
Right. So a bunch of the pros of Bitcoin, it's decentralized. So there's no one person in control.
Right.
It's global. It's which we talked about before. It's trustless. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that everyone in Bitcoin is untrustworthy. What it means is that you don't need trust. Everything is mathematically and cryptographically verifiable, and therefore, based on mathematics, you don't need to trust anyone. You can 100% be assured, based on the laws of mathematics, that whatever you just sent will get to where it needs to go. It's very internet friendly.
Easy to use.
Yeah. It does enable microtransactions.
Right. Yeah. So like we were talking about earlier, like the geeks on the nerds on the internet trying to find the infrastructure to allow for microtransaction. And would this allow for that?
It would, yeah, because
but you would still need the companies or the websites to allow it still, right? Which
yeah, like websites would have to build themselves around that idea.
Yeah.
There's still a couple components in the internet that we need to figure out, like Web 3.0 stuff that's coming down the pike. But eventually the internet itself will be decentralized, and all of your web browsing will be decentralized. And you'll have control of your data, and you won't be
I would love that.
Yeah. You won't be cattle in someone else's data farm.
Yeah.
It cannot be inflated. Caveat. It is currently, there are new coins being created every 10 minutes right now.
Right.
But it is set up in such a way that by around 2140 or something like that, all the Bitcoins that will ever exist will have been mined into creation. And from that point, no more Bitcoin will ever come into existence.
So there's a end date kind of schedule or whatever.
Right.
So they know, and that's why. But, and I know we're going to get into it more, but like as far as the mining, how do they limit the mining? Yeah.
We're almost there.
Okay.
Cryptographically secure. So there's a problem. Bitcoin's not the first thing that's tried to be money on the internet. There's been other attempts by other cryptographers and programmers to create like digital cash, and some have been more successful than others, but the fundamental problem that they face is a double spending problem. How do you prevent someone from spending money somewhere and then before that transaction has concluded spending that same money somewhere else?
So you're talking about like you put like $20 into an e-wallet, quote unquote, not Bitcoin, but you put in like $20 into an e-wallet, and then you spend $10 on a service, and then before that transaction is complete, you spend that same $10 on another transaction that they both go through. Is that the idea?
Right. Or only one goes through, but either way, whichever one goes through, like it could be that, like, yeah, it's a way that you can possibly scam people. It's a common flaw in attempts at digital currency, and it's one of the hardest problems that we've faced. And we're going to go into that in some more detail as well.
Okay.
It's borderless. So you can actually keep Bitcoin in your brain. You can create what's called a brain wallet, and you can travel the world with this Bitcoin stored in your head. And when you need it, you can access it.
sounds insane, but I like it.
I mean, there's been times in the past where like people are like leaving war zones or whatever, and they're trying to bring whatever they can with them. And like if you're entering or crossing through a country that isn't necessarily friendly to you, like people can have their like livelihoods and wealth stripped from them. And so this is a safe way to travel and not have your money at risk, and you can take all your money anywhere with you. There's no banks. You are your own bank. It is a really good hedge against inflation. So if you remember back to our economics episode and our earlier talk today about inflation, inflation is the act of diluting the money supply, printing more money, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have a thing that is cryptographically secure and will only ever have a certain amount versus something like the dollar, which will continue to inflate every year, and you need to park your money somewhere, are you going to park it in the thing that's constantly losing its value, or are you going to take the option to park it something that's only going to gain in value in the long run? So it's a really good hedge against inflation, and you can make a lot of money for now.
Yeah.
And the reason I say for now is because like once the entire, like, let's say there's a potential future where like Bitcoin is the money of the world.
Right.
And once it has already achieved that status and it's stable at that status, at that point, just owning Bitcoin isn't a way to make money anymore.
Right.
Necessarily. Like, other than through the deflation, natural deflation that happens. So paper monies are inflationary, hard monies are deflationary, gold and Bitcoin. Deflationary means just having the money does actually get a little bit more valuable over time, and
the more you can hold on to, right?
It would actually be a viable strategy
to save.
Yeah. And just save. And like, because you're not an expert in investing, don't invest, just save your money. And you know that when you retire, it'll be worth more.
Right. Just based on the fact that you saved that amount and that amount did not circulate during that time. Right.
Right. Well, the population grows, the economy grows, so there's more people, more products, all chasing the same amount of limited money. And therefore, the value has to rise as the economy develops and as time goes on. Yeah. If you're in a deflationary money.
Got it.
The real cons for Bitcoin at the moment is its low adoption.
Right. You need more people.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people who actually use it as money right now because its main value is as a hedge against inflation, and so people mainly use it as an investment.
Savings and stuff, yeah.
But there are places that take Bitcoin like as payment.
Yeah, you bought a laptop using Bitcoin, right? Or did you convert it and then?
No, I actually bought it with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Well, technically, what I did was I bought Amazon gift cards with Bitcoin, and I used those gift cards to buy the laptop.
You were able to buy Amazon gift cards, right? Was that some kind of third-party company that did that?
Yeah, there was a company, I don't think they're around anymore. There was a company that took advantage of Amazon's... Amazon has this thing where like it hires people across the world in like lower income countries and stuff to do work for them, and they'll pay them in like Amazon credit. But a lot of those people who receive those Amazon credit, they can't use it for everything or even at all, depending on where they live. And so they go and sell their Amazon gift cards or their whatever they're paid in on the market for whatever as much money as they can get. And so there was a company that would allow you to essentially buy gift cards and buy Amazon credit with Bitcoin, because those people could use Bitcoin where they couldn't use the Amazon credit.
And I remember now that you were saying that like you could kind of like set your price, like you could kind of like choose how much Bitcoin you're willing to give
discount, right? So you can like essentially like you fill up a shopping cart on Amazon and then you post it on this website, and then one of those, and you set how much of a discount you want. And then essentially one of those employees who needs Bitcoin will go through and like pick which thing to buy for someone, giving them the Amazon, using their Amazon credit to buy that for you, and then receiving the Bitcoin in return.
Gotta love the internet.
Dude, yeah. One of the problems or the downsides in Bitcoin at the moment is the type of government regulations that are around it, depending on what country you're in. For instance, in the U.S., the law that the IRS has, the ruling that the IRS has said for Bitcoin is that it's essentially gets taxed at capital gains.
Oh, for any profit gained from it?
They basically classified it as a commodity, and so anytime you convert Bitcoins to dollars, any profit you made off of that, you're supposed to pay capital gains on that. But that's not a problem if your strategy is to hold for the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, if you need that money, you're going to end up paying capital gains.
Yeah. One of the problems that Bitcoin has had in the past, but it's mostly solved now, has been like confirmation times.
As far as transactions go?
Yeah, which is a little too early to explain how that works, but essentially new blocks get created every 10 minutes, and you need a certain number of blocks after. You need to be included in a block, and then you need a certain number of blocks in order for it to be considered absolutely final and secure, depending on the size of your purchase. So, like, if you wanted to buy something really big, like a house, the person receiving would want to wait a lot of blocks. And if you were buying something small, like a cup of coffee, it could be inconvenient for the coffee shop to wait 10 minutes to know if your payment went through.
I see.
But there are solutions to that already. Anyway, so let's talk about it. How does Bitcoin actually work?
Yeah.
So the main problem that Bitcoin solves is something called the Byzantine Generals Problem. And this has been a problem going back in history, and Bitcoin is the first thing in history that has solved that problem. And so I actually have a video queued up here that we can watch.
Cool.
About the Byzantine Generals Problem. So here we go.
Let's do it.
I'm going to explain it by using an ancient problem that Bitcoin claims to have solved. It's called the Byzantine Generals Problem, and until now, it's been unsolvable. The problem goes like this. How do you make absolutely sure that multiple entities which are separated by distance are in absolute full agreement before an action is taken? In other words, how can individual parties find a way to guarantee full consensus? Here's the example. Imagine that you are a general in the Byzantine army and you're planning to attack an enemy city. You have the city surrounded by several battalions, each of them camped several miles from the other, and each of them led by another general. A coordinated attack on the city from all sides at the same time will be successful, but an uncoordinated attack will likely end in defeat. You have decided to attack at dawn, but you have no walkie-talkies or cell phones, and signals from flags, torches, or smoke could be seen by the enemy. How do you make sure with absolute certainty that all of the other generals reach consensus and all attack together at dawn? You could send messengers on horseback, but what if one of them is captured or killed before delivering the message? You would need to have a reply from each of your generals confirming that they have received your message, which means that they would have to send messengers to you on horseback, but what if they are captured or killed? What if a messenger is captured by the enemy and an imposter messenger with a fake reply is sent back to you? And how do the other generals know that the messages that they received from you are genuine and haven't been intercepted and altered by the enemy? Worse yet, what if some of the other generals are traitors, and they send messages back to you confirming that they will attack at dawn when their true intention is to retreat? How can you ever be absolutely certain that all of your battalions will reach consensus and attack simultaneously? Like I said, this problem has remained unsolved for thousands of years, and at its core, it's all about individual parties being able to trust each other directly, no strings attached. Bitcoin claims to have conquered this problem. Now imagine that the battalions are actually computers on a network, and that the generals are copies of a computer program running a ledger. A ledger that, via some very complex math, records transactions and events in the exact order that they happened. The key here is that all of these ledgers are exactly the same for everyone. As soon as a change is made on one copy of a ledger, if it is proven to be true by the math, all other copies of the ledger are updated to match. What we have here is a distributed ledger that is also always in consensus. This is one of the first things to understand about Bitcoin. It is the first full consensus distributed ledger mankind has ever seen. This network can be expanded across the entire planet. It means that individual parties on opposite sides of the world can come to consensus on an event without requiring any third party as an intermediary for trust. Whether it's an order from a general to his troops or an order from you for a pizza, a distributed ledger confirms via math whether an event is true and records it permanently. Bitcoin, the first full consensus distributed ledger, is a trust machine.
So
Yeah. Pretty good.
That's an
Pretty good
interesting,
analogy.
that concept of the general's problem, right? So let's to explain how Bitcoin works. Let's walk through what actually happens in a transaction.
Yeah, please.
So I'm gonna. You're gonna buy me a coffee, and I'm gonna pay you back with a Bitcoin.
Okay. Do I buy it with Bitcoin? Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
The example is just me
Okay.
paying you, right?
Okay.
And you're getting a whole Bitcoin for coffee, so you better be happy.
But this isn't a future where one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Sure. Anyway, I'm not making $70,000 off a cup of coffee.
So, you give me the coffee,
Yeah.
and you give me your Bitcoin address. Okay, so you'll have what's called a wallet on your phone or on your whatever. You'll have an address.
Yeah.
You give that to me. I take that and I input it into my wallet to start a new transaction. I say I want to send 1 Bitcoin to Drew's address, and then I sign that with my digital signature.
Right.
And then I broadcast it to the Bitcoin network. So that's the first.
So then
couple
what
steps.
happens?
So once it goes to the Bitcoin network, it starts propagating around whichever the Bitcoin network is run by people called miners, and we'll explain that concept here. But essentially, some of the miners are going to hear that transaction, and they're going to rebroadcast it across the network in a peer-to-peer style until it's like transmitted through the network.
This is all happening silently. Like there's no like.
Yeah.
This doesn't.
Our involvement is basically done
over,
as soon as I send that transaction. Except you may want to watch the network and see when that transaction has gone through, been processed, or in Bitcoin we say confirmed.
Yeah.
Okay. So, excuse me. So, I send the transaction is now sitting in what's called the mempool, which is the memory pool of all the floating unconfirmed transactions
going on at one time, at any given time, right?
And then what'll happen is that the miners are trying to create what are called blocks. And so Bitcoin is just a ledger. Okay. A ledger is just like a list of transactions that have happened. This address sent this address this many coins. This address sent that address this many coins. It's just a list of transactions.
From address to address.
From address to address.
For a specific amount of Bitcoin.
Right. And so all these floating, unconfirmed transactions get scooped up by a miner and assembled into a block. Okay. And then what happens is the miner starts hashing that block. Okay. So let's talk about what hashing is.
Please.
So hash is a mathematical operation that allows you, with like a particular mathematical operation, to put as much data into it as you want, and it will spit out a random assignment of like letters and numbers
to attribute to what just happened.
It essentially like obfuscates the data, right? So the hashing algorithm that Bitcoin uses is called SHA-256. It's used all over the internet, in your web browsing, your email. It's all over. Anyway, SHA-256 outputs 256 ones and zeros. So
it's a
I could put in a book. I could have a SHA-256 equation process a novel or a podcast or a video or a Bitcoin transaction or a block. Okay. It doesn't matter what it is you put in. You put in a sequence as long as you want of ones and zeros, and that SHA-256 algorithm will chop it up and turn it into a random assortment of 256 ones and zeros.
Okay.
Okay.
So 256 is the number of zeros and ones it's going to change it into, basically.
Right.
So you give it a thing, you give it some kind of data, and it's going to change it into this. Okay.
Right. And what's special about hashing is that you can put whatever you want in and get out a hash. But what you cannot do is take the hash and reverse the math to turn it back into what it originally was.
Right.
So it's a one-way conversion.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And so
I'm starting to see the security of it then.
Yeah, it's also computationally expensive if you have to do a lot of these hashes. And so what essentially Bitcoin is doing, what these miners are doing, is they're taking that assembled block, they're feeding it into the SHA-256 algorithm,
and using their CPU,
which is going to spit out a number. Well, there's requirements for what types of blocks or what output of the SHA-256 is acceptable. It's called the difficulty setting in Bitcoin. And so what they do is they set it so that, yeah, I want you to output 256 digits, but I need the first 18 digits to all be 0.
Oh.
And if the first 15, or what did I say?
You said 18.
If the first 18 digits aren't 0, then the rest of the network will not recognize that as a valid block. And so you have to keep running the SHA-256.
That's why it's taxing to the CPUs, because it's constantly trying to run to match what is the requirement.
Yeah, so inside that block, there's a thing in there called a nonce, which is just a number that you put in to add randomness to it.
So that's the randomness generator of it.
Right. So what you're doing is, like, you start your nonce at 0, you hash it. You see if you get 18 zeros. You didn't, you change that number, you hash it. You didn't get 18 zeros, you change that number, you hash it.
So who sets the requirement for the 18 zeros then?
The network does.
And the network is the combination of all
back
of the
when
different
Bitcoin was
miners,
new,
or what?
they could keep the difficulty of the hashing
Relatively easy.
relatively low because there wasn't as many. The network wasn't as big. There wasn't as many people mining.
Right. So
Right.
now the problem then became making sure that the miners weren't the problem, or weren't becoming the problem. So you had to add a level of security to maintain.
Right.
the
So
miners,
essentially,
right?
what's happening is there's miners all over the world
Mm-hmm.
who are constantly trying to mine the next Bitcoin, and mining the next Bitcoin means successfully hashing the next block to the correct difficulty.
Gotcha.
So everyone's computers all over the world are chugging away on these hashing algorithms, hoping
see.
to come up with the one that has the proper difficulty setting. As soon as they do, they broadcast that block to the rest of the network.
And that's a Bitcoin.
No, well, that's a block on the blockchain.
So what is a...
As a reward for finding the block, one of the things they put in that block before they start hashing it is a Bitcoin reward to themselves.
Gotcha. So they get a percentage of a Bitcoin for the reward.
Right.
Of
So
mining
when
it.
Bitcoin started, the block reward was 50 Bitcoins.
God dang.
Yeah. But Bitcoin wasn't worth anything back then.
Sure.
So
but I'm just thinking,
every 10 minutes, there was another 50 Bitcoins that came into existence.
Right. What is it
And
now?
that's what we
What is
looked
it
at
now?
earlier. That's this thing.
So every 10 minutes is one
Block.
Bitcoin, or is one block? So it's one block. How many Bitcoin are being created?
So before I get to that, the other thing about the hashing of the blocks is that the difficulty gets retargeted every 2 weeks in the software code. Okay.
But is it the same difficulty, like across the board for
So
everybody?
they can add, or yes, it's always the same difficulty. The network agrees that the difficulty needs to go up or down, and every 2 weeks it adjusts up or down.
I see.
And the reason it adjusts up or down
But it's
is
not always
to target. Essentially, it will rate. Let's say someone gets lucky and just happens to hash a block 2 minutes after the last block was created.
Right.
Okay. If that only happens once, we don't need a difficulty change. But if the Bitcoin network keeps growing and more people are mining, then statistically that will drive the amount of time it takes for someone to solve a block. It'll drive it down. And so in order to put the block time back at 10 minutes, the network will up the difficulty. They'll require more zeros in that hash output.
I see. Is it always like a zero for the difficulty? Like
it's
adding
always
more
zeros. Yeah. So
I was going to say, like, couldn't you add more difficulty by requiring, I need a 1 at 7 and I need a 0 at 8?
Maybe one day. Yeah, maybe one day.
I was going to say, because eventually, but that gives me hope that there is an infinite amount of security to this.
Yeah.
Or at least as far as the mining goes, like you can make the difficulty so hard that like we may never reach the point. I mean, sure, there is a projected date of 2142 or whatever the date was that you projected earlier, right? But like that gives me a lot of hope that like this could, they could elongate this even longer. And as long as people are using it, obviously once we get to the point where people are using it like regularly for like our normal, day-to-day stuff, it'll need to get to the point where there's enough of it. But unless there's smaller coins like the Doge or the Ethereums or these other coins.
So right now there is about...
Wait, what does that say?
6 million terahashes per second. And a tera is like a terabyte. So like that is a lot of hashes happening every single second.
And that's people trying to trying to crack the
There
code
are
of
so many computers across the world hashing Bitcoin right now
So
that
let's talk about the CPU and how much taxing that is on a computer system.
it's super taxing. So when Bitcoin first started, the difficulty setting was low enough that people with just like a laptop could run the Bitcoin software and use their CPU to hash.
Yeah.
Okay. Then as Bitcoin started to grow and more miners, they started increasing the difficulty. Eventually the difficulty and the total hash rate of the network became such that you need, like, just using a GPU or a CPU wasn't good enough. And so people started stacking a bunch of GPUs into a computer and making the GPUs do the hashing, because GPUs are really good at parallel processing.
Right.
And so then Bitcoin moved to the GPUs, and now all of a sudden, like, that's why like GPUs became really hard to buy for a while, because when crypto
Still
value
even
goes
now.
up, people start buying a bunch of GPUs to start mining with.
Just as a side note, I want to, and I know I've got a buddy who may or may not be listening to this podcast, but we used to work at in a college town, and the property we worked at provided free power.
Oh,
So there was
probably people in there.
No, there was
running Bitcoin mining.
So we had an apartment we had to inspect. It was just a standard inspection. It happens twice a year or whatever. This person had been living there for 4 years because they're a senior in college now. And we walked in and he wasn't home, but we walked into their room. Their entire closet, walk-in closet, was filled with computers, and it wasn't just computers. Like, it wasn't like a standard, like you would look at, like the one
it's
I'm
like
looking at here.
open motherboards with easy breathing room
They
with
had
like
fans,
stacks
box
of
fans.
cards.
Literally, their door. They replaced their door with box fans, blowing air out.
It looks
And
like a
you
drug
walk in- and we had
grow operation.
We had to move the fans to be able to go in there, and there was just stacks of CPUs and GPUs running.
Yep.
And they were all connected to like a central.
That was a smart kid. Because the thing is, like, if you have an arrangement where you can get free power, like the main cost to a miner, like
power.
You might think it's the hardware because it gets expensive, but no, the main cost is the power. Because when enough people start mining, it drives that cost down to. Anyway,
and there was more than just him, but he was
if
the
you can
biggest.
get
He had his
cheap
entire
power,
closet filled
right.
with it. That was the biggest I've ever seen.
Places with cheap power are usually the places that
CPUs,
are big in mining.
Yeah.
You'll get giant warehouses set up like near hydroelectric dams and stuff. There's some areas
where it's cheap as
hell. I think China outlawed mining there, but at some point, at some point they had all these like hydroelectric dams for expansions that they had planned, but the expansions didn't go through, like the cities that people never moved into, and they got these hydroelectric dams that are supplying power to no one. And so you get people these companies that will move out there because the power is so cheap just to do mining.
Damn. That's crazy. Just as a side note, it's crazy that China did all this infrastructure for all these cities that nobody moved into. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. There's ghost cities in China because they built all this infrastructure thinking that people were going to move into these hubs, and then they just never did.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, there's ghost cities here, but for different reasons,
Yeah, no, but like there, they like
an old gold mining town that went dry or something.
Right, but like this is like a you're thinking about like feudal China and how they
a place where like a factory closed down.
Right. Like Detroit's becoming a feudal city, or a ghost city in a sense. But anyway, like China like fully set it up to be like they wanted people to move in. Like they fully set it up expecting that people would like influx into the city, trying to like stimulate some kind of like economic growth or whatever.
It's not like a natural economic way for a city to develop. That's not how cities come to be,
So crazy
in history.
Anyway,
typically.
Sorry, side note.
Yeah, no worries. Tons of hashing. So CPUs were used, and then GPUs, and then someone developed what's called an ASIC, which is an application specific integrated circuit. So it's a particular piece of integrated circuitry that is purpose built for SHA-256 hashing. There's no other circuitry in there for any other purpose. Its entire design is for SHA hashing.
So you don't need to buy a specific GPU or any kind
the
of
problem
GPU
with GPUs is they're
They have all these
massively
other things.
parallelizable, but they are
Say that 10 times fast.
yeah, right. But they have so many functions. And so there's a bunch of your potential processing power that gets left at the table
Right.
because it's not meant for
Yeah,
that.
your max is probably 40% of the GPU's power because it's meant to do other things. Yeah.
Right. And so there came a point where ASICs got popular and it's never gone back since. So now, even if you have like 10 of the best graphics cards, you're not going to compete like Bitcoin mining.
Gotcha. So
With
there's
them.
specific mining rigs now.
Right. And so what people end up doing, because they still want to mine with all these graphics cards they got, is they'll mine one of these other cryptocurrencies that are not Bitcoin
They'll do Doge
and that have a
or
low
other
enough hash rate that their graphic card can produce a bunch of it.
I see. Yeah.
And that's
so they're
where-
still making some money, but they're not doing it at the rate that they might have been with
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
Right. So,
Or
yeah.
at least the value.
So that is
It's crazy.
how a block is created, is by hashing. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the reason it's called a blockchain is because the nature of the block is that. So you see how like having a competition for whoever proves that they use CPU power in order to generate a block. That can be verified by everyone mathematically that block is valid because all you have to do is look at the number of zeros on the hash.
Right.
Right. And then essentially what you do is inside that block, you don't just have your block, your Bitcoin reward as a miner, all the transactions you included, but you also include the previous block, its hash as part of this block.
To prove
And
that
that's
you were
how
in a line.
that's how these blocks chain together, hence the
see.
term blockchain.
Okay.
And so as each block gets added to the chain, your transaction for that coffee that we did will end up further and further back, which means if you wanted to go and get your money back, or I wanted to go and get my Bitcoin back that I sent you, I would have to have more processing power than the entire Bitcoin network and recreate the last 3 or 4 blocks faster than Bitcoin, the entire network, could keep creating blocks. And so the only thing Bitcoin is actually susceptible to as a security risk is what's called a 51% attack.
And that's basically where, just by context, that's basically where like there's enough people to attack it in a sense.
So
or there's enough
essentially
miners
what
to
that
go
means
against it.
is if you have enough processing power that represents 51% of the processing power of the entire Bitcoin network, then you will process more blocks than anyone else because you have more processing power than anyone else. And if you have more processing power than anyone else, you can send money to someone, buy something expensive,
and then request
and then
it back.
rewrite the blocks and make a longer chain. Because the way Bitcoin works is whichever chain is the longest,
It continues on that
the network
path.
always agrees to always use the longest chain. So if you spend a bunch of money, go buy a Ferrari, and then you go back with all your processing power and mine so many blocks that it outpaces the rest of the network will see your longer chain and
As they
switch to it.
continue.
And now all of a sudden you got a Ferrari without money spent.
Whoa.
But you would
that
have
ever
to no, because it's too secure. It's too much processing power. The idea of having enough processing power to have a 51% attack is just unfeasible with the size of Bitcoin.
Like you got to be talking about like multiple countries worth of like everybody doing the
Right.
exact same kind of like thing.
Right.
Or focusing all of their processing power.
You would need more ASICs than are producible in a year, right? Like the entire world would know based on ASIC supply shortage that someone's trying to make a move, right? Like it's just not feasible to have a 51% attack, to have 51% of the ASICs. You'd have to have the ability to produce more ASICs than anyone else, which, like, you know, like it's just not feasible.
Flag, and then everybody would know that something's up, and then the purchase itself,
and then the price for those would go up,
right? And well, and also the purchase itself of whatever you're trying to like manipulate would have to be so worth it. Like if you're just going for a Ferrari,
Right.
like what?
Right.
Come on, like what are we doing here?
Well, because the other problem
Obviously,
is
you spend enough
like,
money on the ASICs, you don't need to worry about it.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
spent so much money on these ASICs that you could be making a fortune just in block
Mining.
rewards.
Yeah.
So why would you, like, by
Risk
doing a 51% attack, you would have attacked the very network that you just invested so much
Right.
in, that you're
Right.
getting so much out of.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
That is why Bitcoin
But
is secure. And you'll hear people complain about how much energy Bitcoin uses, but it is the very fact that it uses that much energy is what keeps it secure. And in the long run, if Bitcoin is the money for the
won't
world,
necessarily have to be
the
as
amount of
much
value
energy.
that it's protecting for the amount of energy it's investing is actually, like, it's a good ratio.
Well, and plus, eventually, we'll get to a point where it won't need to be investing that much energy into it as much, right?
Right.
It'll get to a
Well,
point where
no,
it plateaus,
it'll
won't
always go up.
The energy use.
The hash rate will likely always go up, because if it ever stops and our efficiencies and our ability to design chips keeps going, but our hashing doesn't keep going with it, then eventually we could be susceptible to a 51% attack.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Plus,
I guess we just have
miners
to hope that
miners
Bitcoin would
want
lead to
those
a
sweet
world
sweet
where-
bitcoins, and so they want to try and get as much of a chunk as they can, and so they keep investing in more and more and more and more
Right.
hardware to get a higher
just
percentage
thinking, I
of the
guess-
blockchain mining pool.
I guess eventually we just have to hope that Bitcoin leads to a world where energy it leads to the investing in a world where energy is not a
So
problem
if you're
anymore.
concerned about a waste of energy, there's another side to the argument, which is that Bitcoin can actually be a reason to create more and more energy that the world needs, because you can. One of the main problems with energy creation is distribution and storage, right? Like if you're a power plant, distributing it across lines is wasteful. So you need your power plant to be like somewhat relatively in the area, or else you're going to lose a ton of energy by sending it off somewhere far.
right.
And what you're producing isn't necessarily always needed by the population, and depending on the technology, overproducing, like, that energy still has to go somewhere. And so it's a real, like, tricky business managing, like, cycling up and down a power generation facility.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's true.
so, like, a hydroelectric dam will have, like, multiple generators they can turn on, and you'll see if you drive near one.
Yep.
Sometimes they have all the spillways open,
Right.
and sometimes
Most
not.
of the time, yeah, not.
And that depends on, like, what level of energy usage is needed at that moment.
So you're basically saying that, like, you know, when the energy usage is high, we'll basically just open all the floodgates for all of these different, you know, facilities.
And when it's low,
and
they can
consumption
keep their
areas.
production up and still make money by selling that energy to miners.
Right, because the energy is being, can be used and can be generated. It's more of like the usage is not matching what the capabilities are.
And because Bitcoin, or mining's main cost is energy, they're sensitive to the energy price. So, like, during peak hours when the energy is needed most and the price goes up, they wouldn't necessarily be as interested in buying that. But then down on the down hours where they would normally start winding down their thing. They can keep it running and buy cheaper energy.
Which also, it's more cost efficient because winding down costs money.
Right.
Just winding it down.
Well, and it also can be dangerous because it takes time, depending on the
puts a lot of
production
wear and tear
technology,
on it.
to wind it back up.
Right. The wear and tear on the equipment is higher because just like when you're like the idea of like starting your car or like idling your car.
Like if you're running on a freeway at a constant velocity, it's easier on your engine than going up and down
and your fuel efficiency
fast and slow and starting and stopping and turning in city traffic, right?
Yep. Same idea.
It's the same idea.
Yep.
So Bitcoin can help equalize those spikes and valleys of energy production by buying the energy when it's cheap and no one's using it, to allow them to not have to spin it down
constantly.
Right. So avoiding wear and tear, helping energy companies get the extra funding they need,
so that we can get more safety involved in all.
And we can have more money going into producing more ability.
So the infrastructure will
provide
grow.
more power.
The infrastructure will grow, right? People are worried about all these wildfires and stuff going on. So a lot of the times it's because of that. Like you get a lot of these like oversaturated lines and they're near power. Like they just don't have the infrastructure to like cost or the money to be able to pay these people to go and clear these lines. Like these people charge a lot of money to go up, fly helicopters to chop down trees near power lines. Like that's an expensive business, you know? But that makes sense.
Essentially, once that miner mines that block and posts it to the blockchain, you on your wallet, you could
receive that.
You would see the transaction. Your wallet would pop up. You'd receive payment. It has one confirmation, and then when a new block is added to it, it's 2 confirmations, and when a new block is added, it's 3 confirmations. So the higher your confirmation count,
the more secure,
the more mathematically secure you are that transaction can never be reversed.
All right.
And so if you're selling a coffee, just the fact that it posts is probably enough. But if you're selling a Ferrari or a house or a corporation, you're going to want to wait a bunch of like confirmations.
10, 20, 30, 40, 50.
Depending on the size, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the basics of how it works, and we're over again. Let's. In fact, we're almost at the next one.
We'll probably just take we'll probably just take this break, and we'll finish it out after this.
Yeah.
Couple breaks in this one.
So does that make Bitcoin a little more clear to you than it has been in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I remember you explaining a lot of this to me when a lot of this was first starting, but it's definitely more clear because I'm older. I understand things a little bit better. And,
right.
I was pretty young when you first started explaining this to me. I was like, yeah, that's sick. Like, yeah. And I remember, it's crazy. While the music's playing, is you used to pay me in Bitcoin, and I lost that first wallet that you ever gave me.
Yeah,
that first wallet that I created when you started paying me in it. Like, oh my god,
I've done that to a number of my friends. We'll go out to lunch and they'll buy my food and I'll pay them back with Bitcoin. Offer to pay them Bitcoin. And
how you have to have the recovery pad, like the recovery phrase. I had a notebook that I kept with me like religiously, and then I moved 3 times within like 2 years
and lost it.
And I lost it, and that phrase is gone, and I can't recover that wallet anymore, unfortunately. So.
All right. Well, we'll talk about security here coming up.
Yeah. All right. See you in a bit.
All right. we
are
actually
back.
we made that song for a commercial for Reason.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a whole like project with our whole studio group. John was there.
Oh, was that for this thing? For the propeller head?
Yeah, for the propeller head balance.
The balance that we're using currently.
Well, actually, no, this was for a different one of their products. We did one for that. And
that was like your first one you did with them, right? Was when you did the balance.
This one was for like a sound pack, and we used that sound pack to produce that song.
Okay.
It's called Soul School.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty dope.
Cool.
Anyway, yeah, we're talking about Bitcoin.
We are back to Bitcoin.
So
we kind of left off on like the security of it all.
Yeah, we had just kind of walked through like the essentials of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
What I did leave out is how the signatures work.
Yes,
right?
I was going to ask you about
wallets and
that.
the signatures and stuff like that. So you've probably heard that Bitcoin isn't exactly anonymous, but it's pseudonymous. So what that means is all your transactions that happen, they don't have your name attached. Instead, what they have is a wallet address attached.
A pseudonym for what you want to be represented, like the representative of you, basically.
Yeah. And so the way that works is through a special form of encryption called private key, public key pair encryption. I don't know the official name, but it's essentially two numbers that are related through a super complicated mathematical formula in such a way that you can use one number to generate the other, but you can't use the other one to generate the first number.
So it's one way again.
Again, one way.
So you can you create your back end key that you know.
Right. So you'll have
who know
a
your
private key and a public key.
Yeah. So the front end is not something that can be reversed to know your private key.
Right. So the public key is your Bitcoin wallet address.
Okay.
The private key is the thing that only you know that you use to sign transactions that prove that it came from your wallet. And what's so clever about the math of this private public key encryption is that people who want to be sure that that signature came from you, they can use your public key and do math on it to verify that this particular thing was indeed signed by the private key associated with that public key.
Even though they don't see it.
Even though they still can't know what the private key is.
Right.
So it's cool math in that, yeah, you can keep that secret of the private key while still the public key is useful.
Right, and that goes back to what you were saying about being able to have all of your Bitcoin in your head. You can have your whole wallet stored in your head as long as you memorize your private key. You have access to all of your money, your Bitcoin.
And so there's essentially a specific process that can be done to generate like a series of words that can be reverse engineered to recover your keys.
Right.
And so you could actually even create a wallet that has never touched the internet just using the math. Like you can have it spit out those 12 words. Right. And you can use those, keep it in your head, take that public key, put some Bitcoin in it, and then never even have an internet connected wallet.
As long as you know the 12 words, you can use that as your public key?
As your private key, right? Like,
what about your address, though? Because you need to give that to people to.
The address is the public key, right? So you would take that, but instead of memorizing the crazy long private key, you memorize the 12 words
for the private key, and that gives you access to it. So you can, as long as you've had internet connection at one point to enable the.
You don't even need to have had it.
Well, how would you have given your public key to people?
Well, I mean, you could text it to someone. Like, let's say you have regular phone. Connection. Let's say you have regular phone service, but no internet.
Yeah. Okay.
You can still create private public key pair with a 12-word backup and like text that
I got you. Okay.
that public key to someone.
But still,
they
you
can
need
send
some
you
sort of connection,
Bitcoin, right? Like you, it's ideal to have internet.
Yeah, obviously. But so basically, so let's just say in modern times, right? If you were in a war-torn country and you had access to the internet your entire life, but all of a sudden
your life
things have turned upside down, and as long as you remember your private key,
leave the country, right?
As long as you have memorized the 12-word private key that gains you access, you could leave the country with nothing physically.
You can take all your life savings, pop it into Bitcoin, memorize that 12-word key, and then go wherever you need to go as a refugee to get your life out of danger.
Yeah.
And then whenever you get where you're going to end up at, like, and you get established again, you get your internet connection, you can recover the wallet with those 12 words and have access to your coins.
Right.
Another popular way is to create a paper wallet, which is essentially just taking those 12 words, printing them on a piece of paper, keep them in a safe.
Which I should have done, but I didn't have a safe at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think I had a full coin or anything, but I still had a decent amount.
Yeah. Did you tell that on the air? Or I think that was between.
Oh, did I? I don't know. Yeah. I think I told it on the air.
We should talk about that though, because so that's a thing that happens in Bitcoin. The thing is, because if you lose that private key, so and basically you lose those 12 words, you will never be able to access those coins. And that's a security feature. It's that way on purpose so that no one can steal from you. But it also means that you are responsible for the security of your own wallet. Yeah. So let's talk about security, because you want the private key is essentially the keys to your bank account. Okay. So imagine right now you got a bunch of money set up in a savings account. You wouldn't go to work and like leave your savings account password on a Post-it note where everyone walking by can like see it. And so in the same way, you want to like keep your private key as secret and
safe as possible. Somewhere where you can always recover it.
Right.
Yeah, basically what had happened, if I didn't tell it on there already, is like Dean had sent me when a lot of this had first started, like I was investing small amounts because I was, I just didn't want to put too much money. I was putting like $10 here and there. I think I had gotten up to $100 at one point of my own money into it. And Dean was also, anytime he was paying.
Oh, that's probably worth a lot.
No, I know. But Dean, I don't think it was fully up to 100 because I was also paying you with it as well. Like we were basically, any transaction between me and you at that time, we were just using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so I was paying you in Bitcoin, you were paying me in Bitcoin. And at some point, I had moved like 3 different times within like a year or two, and I written down my 12-word, recovery, and I had access to my wallet the entire time, but there's always a point where it requires your 12-word key to recover it when you're like switching to a new phone and you re-download the app or whatever it might be. And I lost the notebook that I had kept. I kept all my stuff in it, man. And I kept all and it was always close to me. But I had also gotten a new car. So like there was a lot of like transferring of things going on in my life. And I just lost the notebook that had my 12-word key in it. And I probably did have, I don't think I had a full coin, but I probably had like maybe half a coin.
It's actually estimated maybe that some like 5 or 10% of Bitcoin
is just
lost. And that's actually part of the features of Bitcoin as well, because that guarantees that over time, not only will the money not inflate, but it will actually reduce.
Deflate,
And so, remember we were talking about the block rewards that started at 50? And it's set so every 210,000 blocks created, the block reward cuts in half. Okay. So the first halving I had that written down somewhere.
Went from 50 to
like what
25.
the dates were. Yeah, but the first halving went down to 25, then to 12 and a half in 2016. I think the first halving was in 2012. And then it went down to 6.25 back in 2020. And it's actually next month is the next halving.
Oh, really?
Next month, it cuts from 6.25 down to
3.125 or whatever.
So it's really interesting if you compare the halving events to the price, because it usually spikes around halving events.
Interesting.
And this is an interesting time to be talking about Bitcoin because it's in the news right now for it breaking its all-time record recently. It is booming. And I don't really condone the tulip mania investment approach in Bitcoin, but if that's what you like to do, then that's what you like to do. You know, you're risking your own funds by like day trading Bitcoin. For me,
Bitcoin specifically, there's other coins to day trade.
No, I mean, day trading in general is its own, like, you know, thinking you can like come up with ways to like be more clever than the market. Like most people who attempt that, it doesn't work out for them. But anyway, for me, the strategy is just you look at the fundamentals of Bitcoin, which is that it will be a deflationary money. It will only ever be 21 million, and more will get lost over time. It is the most secure money that's ever existed, and essentially there's nothing to stop it from taking over.
Yeah.
And eventually, once, you know, the central banks of the world have printed their monies into oblivion, people are going to take refuge in things like Bitcoin. And one day, I truly believe Bitcoin will be the currency that the world uses.
You know, barring a blackout, a solar flare that blacks us all out.
Right. And
at that point,
I think that's a really hopeful thing. I think it's a really powerful thing, because if Bitcoin is the world's money, that means governments no longer have the ability to tax you directly. They can no longer seize your assets or your bank accounts. They can't inflate the currency to fund their wars. Yeah,
so imagine a time where you can actually decide you don't want to pay taxes and all your money is in, you know. You know, if there's something going on where you don't agree with. If you
work and get paid in Bitcoin and buy everything in Bitcoin, the government has no ability to get in between that transaction and forcefully tax money from you.
Right.
They have to convince you to pay taxes.
Has to be willingness to like,
which is how it used to be. They used to have to convince you to pay the taxes, and they used to have like people that they would like make deals with who would like be their tax collectors.
They were the lobbyists of the time, right?
No, not like the lobbyists. Like there would be people who were like influential in wherever area. That's what I'm saying. They're like lobbyists. Big. Well, lobbyists are people who try and convince politicians to do things.
I'm saying of the time. I'm saying the lobbyists of the time to convince the population that taxes are a good idea because this is our goal.
Maybe propagandists.
I don't know. I guess maybe lobbyist is the easiest to understand.
Anyone who had a sort of business where like people's money had to flow through, the governments would try to make deals with that person to collect taxes on their behalf. And
right, but they still have to do convincing.
Right, but they could never really tax everyone whatever the tax rate was. Like it was actually not that hard to avoid paying taxes.
Yeah.
But now, yeah, like if you work a normal job and you get like a normal W-2 paycheck, like your taxes come out of your check before you even get your money.
Yep.
And so essentially your employer is the tax collector for the government.
Yep.
Unless you can break out of that, build your own business and, you know, but if you start getting paid in Bitcoin, the things start becoming different. I mean, your employer still could send some Bitcoin to the government and some to you, But if you set up your own income stream, no one can take that from you.
Well, if it becomes to a point where like things are happening and like Bitcoin is becoming a major transactionary thing, like setting up your own business and like, you know, receiving all your funds in Bitcoin, like, yeah, the government has to convince you at that point to start paying taxes because there's no obligation at that point, other than the fact that your name is in all capitals and you sign this contract.
So for me, putting money in Bitcoin is about hedging for the future against the dollar. It's also about every dollar that gets put into Bitcoin is one less like blood-soaked U.S. Treasury note that is funding wars overseas and funding the deaths around the world, you know, like, you know, U.S. dollars are blood money. Bitcoin isn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms to open. But,
that's my radical libertarian coming out.
That's it's definitely it's becoming more obvious for people, but it's definitely still something that people have to come to terms with. Like people don't really understand that. People don't see that as being a reality of where their money, what the money, the U.S. dollar is doing in the world. You know. So,
let's talk about security. And if you are interested in getting into Bitcoin, what are your different options as far as securing it? So there's two main different types of wallets. There's one wallet that's called a custodial wallet, and there's one that's like a private wallet. Okay. I will highly recommend everyone to always use a private wallet, one where you personally have and control the keys to your Bitcoin. If you don't have the keys, you don't have the cheese. I think it's like a thing going around a long time ago. It's cheesy, but whatever.
Literally.
So if you don't control the keys, then the Bitcoin isn't actually yours. So what a lot of people do when they want to buy Bitcoin is they'll set up an account on like a crypto exchange or like any sort of exchange, Cash App or
Venmo's probably doing it. I think Venmo's doing it. No, they are. Venmo's doing it now.
I haven't seen that. I'll check. But whatever method you use to buy Bitcoin, let's say it's on some online exchange where you can like trade different cryptos and whatnot. When most of those exchanges are custodial wallets, which means that the keys, the private keys, are actually held by the exchange and not by you. And essentially that is no different than having a conventional bank account where the bank could seize your funds, where if the bank goes broke or the bank can loan out your money to other people, you have to trust them and trust that they're responsible with your money, which is not really much better than the dollar situation.
Yeah. Same thing.
So if you're going to have an exchange account, that's fine. Do that. But once you buy Bitcoin, move it to a private wallet where you control your own keys.
Yeah.
Don't leave your money on an exchange. Some of the biggest heartbreaks that have happened in Bitcoin are from people just buying and selling and buying and buying and buying and leaving all their money on an online exchange, and then the online exchange doing something like skeezy and going out of business, going broke or stealing money or closing down. There's multiple times this stuff has happened. The first famous one was the MT Gox collapse back in like 2011, I think it was.
Just a bunch of people had their money on an exchange and they went bankrupt.
And people didn't get their money back. So, yeah, if it's on an exchange where you do not have the keys, or if it's in the Cash App or in Venmo, it's not your Bitcoin yet.
Yeah.
Until you move it to a private wallet, is technically you don't control it. So you have to understand that. So if you are going to have a wallet, there's a certain amount of responsibility you're assuming for protecting your own Bitcoin. You have to have backups. So I run a wallet that can run on multiple platforms. So I always have it on multiple of my devices in case one of them crashes. And then I've got my 12-word passphrase backed up in multiple places as well. So almost nothing could make me lose full access to my Bitcoin.
Right.
And then if you want to be even more secure, there's things called hardware wallets.
Yeah.
Where they're essentially little like USB
drives.
devices that they keep your crypto safe, but everything has its upsides and downsides. Its upside is that it's a physical thing that you can control. You can throw it in your safe. The downside is if it burns, if you lose it, you lose your Bitcoin. Unless I think those ones can also have passphrases that
backed
you
up
can
on some
back
kind of
up
online
elsewhere.
server.
Yeah,
or online something.
I've never had enough to feel like I justified that, but and then the brain wallets and offline paper wallets that we talked about before, which is essentially those passphrases.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to buy some Bitcoin, it is as easy as just using the Cash App, going to there, buying some, and then
that's an
transfer it to your
exchange.
wallet.
That's an exchange app, like, right? So that's, you're holding it all.
They're going to charge you a fee essentially to purchase Bitcoin on your behalf.
Yeah.
And I think you get lower fees when you use online exchanges. I think that's the benefit of them, is like you can trade quickly, trade between assets, and
much quicker,
lower fees.
Well, and even
like the
now,
Cash App, I would expect to have higher fees, but for me, it's all about the long run. A little bit of fee up front isn't a big deal to me.
Well, and the convenience of it too is like you can have, like for Cash App specifically, is you can have direct deposit. So like, say you get paid every other week, you can have Cash App, buy a set amount of Bitcoin every 2 weeks based on your paycheck. And you can have that recurring so that you can just always have that. You just know that it's obviously you'd want to transfer that out to a private wallet at some point, especially once you get up to higher amounts. But like it can do that for you on a regular basis so that you're not having to constantly go in there and like do like trading and all that stuff. But for the long haul, that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of people do speculation and day trading with Bitcoin. I mean, it's continuing to mature. The big thing recently is there's ETFs, which is essentially like these big conventional financial investment institutions are starting to get into Bitcoin and offer it as assets in standard portfolios. And so a lot of new money is pumping into Bitcoin from that at the moment, and that's part of what justifies the price going so crazy right now.
Okay, that makes sense.
Some really big players have made some really big Bitcoin purchases recently.
as on behalf of people who are putting in like 401ks and stuff like that, like they're like ETFs are starting to. Interesting. That does make sense as far as like this big boom that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Another interesting thing, like it is maturing to the point, like even I don't know if you heard this story when it came out, but El Salvador actually accepts Bitcoin as legal tender in their country. Wow. You can pay your taxes in Bitcoin in El Salvador. It's the first country to use Bitcoin as legal tender.
Oh shit.
They're actually getting a bunch of flack from the IMF about it. The IMF is refusing to give them loans because they're using Bitcoin as legal tender.
It's the future, man. It's the future. The people want it. I think it's just the governments are going to resist as long as they can. But if you like, one of the big differences it can make in people's lives is like if you live in one of these countries where like the currency is hyperinflating, like where you're spending $1 million, like of I'm hedging against dollars, but like if you were living back in Venezuela during the hyperinflation, like bro, like
you put your money in Bitcoin, like you're doing okay. But
yeah, like there's some countries where you're literally spending $100,000 of your currency to buy like milk or water or whatever.
Right.
Like that's
the other big use is
right
like remittances. So like a lot of people will like move to a country for a better opportunity and work hard and earn a bunch of money and then send it back to their home country, to their family. But depending on how poor or third world that country you come from is, like it can be really, really expensive and slow to send money across the world. And so Bitcoin is a solution for that as well.
Yeah. Especially like El Salvador, right? Like you have people move out of El Salvador and make a bunch of money and send you Bitcoin that could earn you, $100,000 or whatever. And
right.
You can now pay your taxes in your home, you know, your pay for your house or whatever it might be if it's a accepted currency. Like, that's huge.
So Bitcoin has real value in the world and it actually is changing people's lives.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether you think it's just a hype thing that a bunch of tech nerds are into and speculating on, like at the core
15 years,
at the core of the technology, it's about freedom. It's about having control of your own money. It's about not being able to censor someone from being able to interact economically from the world.
Yeah.
It actually has huge advantages and upsides, and it would be a smart thing. This is not investment advice, but I think, let's just say I buy Bitcoin every paycheck, always, regardless of the price. Now, I didn't used to, and I'm kicking myself for it, but
yeah.
And if your answer to that is, but what if it crashes? Look at Bitcoin's history, look at the fundamentals, understand the technology, read about it, and learn that Bitcoin can't really ever crash down to zero because it has too much value in it, and it actually provides a valuable service around the world at the moment.
Unless some other big moves are being played by governments around the world,
there's governments around the world that are trying to come up with their own quote unquote cryptocurrency, but that is BS. It's not real. I mean, they can really create what they call a cryptocurrency, but it would not be a real cryptocurrency.
It won't be as secure.
It won't be a digital, secure, peer-to-peer, trustless, inflationless cryptocurrency. Right. If they create a currency, a digital currency, it's so they can have extra control over you, and so that they can preserve their ability to inflate it, which is to steal your value every time they do that.
And they'll have
Bitcoin is a way
limitless
for you
possibility to inflate it at that point. Once everything's gone away from paper and there's no more paper money anymore, they'll have the ability to just up and down. It'll be all based on the market and what they wanted to do at the time.
Dude, people have gotten rich off of just posting a QR code of their Bitcoin address on YouTube videos and it getting seen, and a bunch of people just tipping them.
No way. Do we need to do
and
that?
Then the price
we should
going
do
crazy.
that, bro.
I did.
We should do that.
I will be posting our wallet address. So if anyone wants to give us a little tip in Bitcoin, we'll be happy to accept.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
As far as other cryptocurrencies, I don't have a huge opinion on them, but I'll tell you this: Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency. Yeah. No other cryptocurrency has the hash rate that Bitcoin has, which means they're not as secure as Bitcoin. Most of them are created so that people can. They're most of the other ones are pump and dump schemes, which is what people accuse Bitcoin of being. It's people trying to drive up the value of a token
and then dump it
and then sell it off to buy Bitcoin. And that's people, people trying to make use of their giant stacks of GPUs.
Yep.
I get it, but if you're not a highly active, highly educated day trader who is, keeping tabs on the minute,
all the value,
all the time, then you're putting yourself at risk in other cryptocurrencies. So really do your research.
Yeah, I mean, I've had buddies who were doing the day trading type style of cryptocurrencies for a while, and some made a little bit of money, some lost a lot of money.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely something to be wary of.
Yeah, and that's why I don't really advocate it. I'm not against it. I'm just not going to advocate it. So if what I feel comfortable advocating is that everyone should at least own some Bitcoin, understand how it works, set up a wallet, send someone some money, like get familiar with how it works, because it's not as technically
not as you think it is
involved, and it's not as scary as you think. It's actually pretty simple.
Yeah. Once you get it all set up and once you do it a few times, you understand how, like, it's scary in the sense of like you've got to remember this thing and keep it. Like I've learned and lost, but going forward, like it's not so scary. You just got to learn and live, learn about it and
get a group of your friends to all set up wallets together and, pay each other back and forth when you go out to lunch, you know, and, just get used to it being a thing, and because one day this dollar printing craziness is going to come crashing down, and the quicker and the more able you are to switch to something like Bitcoin, the less of an impact that will have on your life.
Yep.
The more you'll be able to keep moving on.
Yep. And you won't be so devastated by it.
Cool. Yeah. So
great episode,
got a couple interesting little points. I did want to talk about Satoshi. I did some math.
Oh yeah.
So the guy who invented Bitcoin, this Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, we don't know if it's a group of people. We don't know what country. We don't know anything. All we know is that they were on the internet back in 2008 through about 2010 when they went
dark.
2009 or 2010 when they went dark, and never anyone heard from them again.
No more posts, no more nothing.
But they were involved in the development of Bitcoin for the first while, and they mined the first number of blocks, and there's it's not 100%, but it's estimated based on like early mined blocks and Bitcoins that were created early that have never moved. There's like an estimate of how many coins that Satoshi actually has.
I wonder how
many. And it's estimated at around 1 million.
Just 1 million coins? A million coins.
A million coins out of the 21 million that will ever exist. Yeah. So at, I guess yesterday's price now, 1.1 million coins would be $83 billion.
Holy shit.
Which would make him the 17th richest person in the world, according to Forbes. Isn't that ridiculous?
17th? You're telling me 83 billion is not the first richest person?
No.
I know.
No.
17th richest person in the world.
But if Bitcoin goes up to about $250,000, right? He will be by far the richest person in the world.
And this person seems like somebody who'd hold on to it.
Yeah.
And in a private wallet somewhere, safe and sound.
Yeah. Also, Bitcoin is the 13th largest currency in the world. Look at this.
Holy shit.
Bitcoin compared to the largest fiat currencies in the world.
Chinese yuan.
The yuan, and this is all priced in Bitcoin,
US
right?
dollar.
So the value of all Chinese yuan is 611 million BTC. The US dollars behind that in 588 million BTC.
Euro, Japanese yen, pound, South Korean won, Indian rupee.
Then number 10 is Brazil. Number 11 is Australia. Number 12 is Taiwan. Number 13 is Bitcoin.
Wow. And then Swiss franc.
Yeah, Bitcoin's
Russian
just
ruble,
above Switzerland.
Mexican peso.
Yeah.
Those are all below the Bitcoin.
Every other country in the world is below Bitcoin.
Holy.
There is more value in Bitcoin than most of the countries of the world.
Tells you something.
The market cap for Bitcoin right now is at some like, let me see. The market cap for Bitcoin. That's the price.
Oh, yeah. The price right now is 68,350
as we speak here on March 14th.
USD.
Yeah, and just yesterday it hit its new all-time high at 73,000. There we go. Market cap $1.34 trillion of Bitcoin exists right now.
Paywall.
Yeah, right.
And it's down 7%.
Yeah. But so here's the thing. If Bitcoin really is the future of money, then the price is going to absorb the market cap of all the other currencies over time, and it will continue to absorb them.
So it'll be astronomical.
Essentially, the market cap of all world's currency
evaporate into this.
is the ultimate market cap potential of Bitcoin. Obviously, I don't think Bitcoin's going to replace everything, and definitely not in our lifetimes. No. I think over time,
100, 200 years.
100, 200 years, I don't see any reason why anyone would. I think 200 years from now, people will look back at this time period, this last 150, 200 years, and be like, those people were stupid.
Ridiculous.
Like, why would you take this fake money from a government? It will be so passe.
I mean, obviously, they won't be able to see. They'll be able to say that in retrospect, not knowing that we didn't have internet.
Right.
Right.
Just like we look back in the day and we see things that people did back then as crazy.
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
But I think that will come to be a truth in the future, because it's not that hard to grasp the facts involved, that if you print more money, the value of money goes down, and the only people that benefits is whoever gets that new money.
Yep.
Everyone else, their prices goes up, and then their resources get taken by the people who had the new money.
Yep.
Something like Bitcoin is the solution to that. It's the solution to these rich people just fleecing the world year by year. The other interesting statistic I heard is even at like the conservative published inflation rates, it only takes 30 years for the value of the dollar to cut in half. So if you work and save for 30 years and you keep it in a bank account, you will literally lose half of your life's work to the government's inflation.
Dang.
So let's stick it to the man.
Yeah.
Let's put more money into something that is freedom promoting.
It's future proof.
That's future proof. Oh, here's another interesting tidbit. The first sale of Bitcoin ever for US dollars was back in October 12th of 2009.
That's months after the initiate. That's 10 months after.
And that's this guy. He was the second guy who was involved in the programming after Satoshi, this Marty Malmi.
Mm-hmm.
He sold 5,050 Bitcoin for $5.
Oh my God.
$5.02 in 2009, which set the first price of Bitcoin at 0.00099 US dollars.
Wow.
That's the first ever price of Bitcoin.
How much did he sell? 5,050?
5,050 Bitcoin
for $5.02.
Yeah. So if you convert that, if you run the math to see what has the percentage increase been, Bitcoin has gone up in its lifetime 7.3 billion %.
Jeez.
And there's still crazy gains to be had. So,
oh my God.
Please, buy some for security and hedging, but it doesn't have to be for making money.
Right. Yeah, and just
don't put more in than you can afford to lose. Yep. Put money aside in Bitcoin, though. If you're going to be putting money in stocks,
or in your savings,
if you're putting money in mutual funds because it's safer, it's more spread and diverse. There's anything denominated and traded in dollars is subject to fail when the currency ultimately collapses.
Crashes, yeah.
And so if you really want to diversify into some Bitcoin, diversify into some gold.
Yeah. Lesson learned.
The first sale of an object for Bitcoin, like a purchase, was pizza. Someone bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin.
Oh my gosh.
Back in 2010.
Wow.
10,000 Bitcoin.
So 2 pizzas probably roughly $10 a piece, so $20.
Yeah,
maybe.
so at today's current price,
$20 worth of pizza, 10,000.
At $69,000.
Yeah.
That
oh my gosh.
if whoever sold that pizza kept their Bitcoin, it would be worth, I don't know how I didn't just do that.
$690 million.
Yeah, for 2 pizzas.
That's a pizza place that's no longer a pizza place. I can tell you that. Or they're Domino's and they're charging people for shit pizza.
Yeah.
And they're making tons of money still.
I got a couple interesting quotes from Satoshi, because if you're interested in Satoshi, I'll link to this website.
Does
it's
he have
called
a Reddit or something?
No, Satoshi has gone silent. But there's a website called Satoshi.NakamotoInstitute.org, and it has preserved all of his forum posts and all of his emails and all of his writings from back when he was active. And you can like read through Satoshi talking about Bitcoin and actively working with other people to develop it. It's super interesting.
I definitely want to read through that.
Yeah, I pulled a couple interesting quotes, though. This was from February 11th, 2009. He says, "Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve. We have to trust them with our privacy, trust them not to let identity thieves drain our accounts. Their massive overhead costs make micropayments impossible."
Yeah. November 13th there.
Yeah, and this is another one. Yeah, someone was asking him, or said, "You won't find a solution to political problems in cryptography." And Satoshi says, "Yes, but we can win a major battle in the arms race and gain new territory for freedom for several years. Governments are good at cutting off the heads of essentially controlled networks like Napster, but pure P2P networks like Nutella and Tor seem to be holding their own. And Tor's still around to this day." So he's right about that. Pure peer-to-peer is the future. And hopefully you will join that Bitcoin future too. It's a beautiful world.
Hell yeah.
All right, any other questions or anything? Anything about it you want me to like cover a little more?
No, I think we did a great job.
Okay. Well, anyone else have any questions, conversation points, send us an email.
Yep.
Hosts at dualitycheck.net, or you can also message us on Facebook or Instagram.
Yep. Yeah, we want to, email us and
comment on YouTube,
interact with us
Rumble.
on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram. Email, obviously, host at dualitycheck.com or .net, sorry. And,
if you're feeling generous, you can send us a tip in Bitcoin into our wallet address, which will be in the show notes. Also,
if you want to just rate our podcast and give us any kind of like help in the generating of that.
About that, our nephew, he told me that he wasn't able to, and I went and looked and I wasn't able to either, so I have to look into it. But for some reason in Apple Podcasts, like the rating doesn't exist for us, but I go on another podcast and it does. So I'll figure out what's going on there. But what you still can do is you can go to our YouTube channel, give us a like, comment,
give us
subscribe. On Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, after each episode, you can review.
Yep.
And
or Rumble too. Rumble, you can like, subscribe. You can let them know that you're interested in this kind of content and you like our stuff. So That'd be super helpful for us to be able to maintain this in the future.
Yeah, so thanks for spending another couple of hours of your time with us, and hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something, and hope you end up with some Bitcoin in your life soon.
Definitely. Love y'all. Take care.